Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Don Parkinson, and I'm a consultation specialist with Atkins Realis. Today, we are continuing our series of live stream topics as our project moves through consultation round 2 of the environmental assessment phase. The topics we are covering parallel our project activities or are of community importance. So we hope these will help our viewers and listeners better understand the project and provide input along the way. And as usual, with me today is my co-host, Jennifer Ashwazake Pereira, my colleague and an Indigenous engagement and traditional knowledge specialist at Atkins Realis. Jennifer is also a member of Henvey Inlet First Nation, which is located on the French River south of Sudbury, and works with me on our projects across Canada. Hi, Jen. Happy Monday
Morning.
noontime.
Happy Monday. I can't say good morning anymore.
No, you can't. I was ready to say that, and then I realized I couldn't. So the nightmare of the morning is over. Let's hope the afternoon
That's
is
right.
better,
Now we're
right?
now we're getting into our week.
We are getting into our week. So today's topic, Jen, as you know, is the preliminary results of the WSR Caribou studies that were conducted as part of the environmental and impact assessments. And this is an important topic, and we thought it was a topic that community members would enjoy listening to. It's the result of a lot of our baseline studies that have been undertaken over the last 5 years, I guess.
Oh wow.
So a long period of time. We started with a winter caribou survey in 2019, and so let's just dive in. And as we normally do, we'll just do a little rundown on what we're going to talk about today. We're going to start with the project background to get everybody up to the sort of same level in terms of knowledge about the project. We're going to talk about the types of studies, caribou studies that have been undertaken. We're going to go over the caribou winter aerial surveys from 2018, 2019, and 2021 in terms of looking at the results. We're going to talk about caribou collaring, like why that is done and how it's done. And then we're going to move into the results of the caribou collaring, um, looking at uh, during the calving season and during overwintering, and then finally we're going to talk about future analysis that there's still more work to be done before the environmental assessment or the impact assessment is completed. And then finally, we're going to talk about how you can get in touch with us. So let's talk about the project location. The project is located in northwestern Ontario. Webequie settlement itself is about 200 to 250 kilometers from both Hudson Bay and James Bay. And the road is a planned 107-kilometer long road running from the airport in Webequie First Nation southeast to just east of the Mukatai River near the McFalds Lake area. In terms of the purpose of the Webequie Supply Road, three main purposes. The first is to move materials, supplies, and people from the airport to the McFalds Lake area. The second is to provide employment and economic development opportunities to community members, but also at the same time allowing them to remain in their community and preserve and enhance their language and culture. And then finally, to provide uh, work experience and training opportunities for youth, and generally to help encourage them to pursue additional skills through post-secondary education and training programs. In terms of the project itself, again, it's a planned 107-kilometer, two-lane uh, gravel road extending from the airport to the McFalds Lake area. Of those 107 kilometers, 17 sit within the First Nations reserve lands. Uh, the actual planning corridor that's used for the purposes of the environmental and impact assessment is 2 kilometers wide. So picture a 2 kilometer wide band extending from Webequie Airport southeast to the McFalls Lake area. So within that band would sit the road, and so that's called our the corridor,
Corridor?
the planning corridor, the corridor that we're going to be working with. And it emerged from a group of alternatives, and then finally the width of the cleared width for the corridor is 35 meters. And then continuing with the description, there would be three major water crossings. The first being of Winisk Lake running east from Webequie. And then the second would be southeast of Webequie across the Winiskissis Channel. And then the final major crossing is the Mukatai River almost at the end of the Webequie Supply Road. So that's southeast of quite a bit southeast of Webequie. Um, a road is more than just a road. So it includes both temporary and permanent aggregate pit or rock quarry areas. These areas, require access roads to get to them, and then there might be water crossings along the way for the road to cross over. So there might be culverts or bridges, other types of water crossing structures required. Um, there would also be temporary facilities such as construction camps that would serve to accommodate construction crews. Um, and there would be operations and maintenance offices uh, built. Those would be permanent facilities at different locations along the road. Going back to the construction camps, they would have uh, supportive infrastructure such as a wastewater treatment plant, like a small wastewater treatment plant, and then a drinking water storage area as well too. And then there would be storage and laydown yards typically associated with the camps, and would be temporary for storing construction materials and equipment as well. So that's basically the description of the project. And now, Jen, we're ready to hop into talking about the different types of studies that have been undertaken for caribou on this project. There's been a lot of effort spent um, doing
Yeah.
um, doing caribou baseline work. Um, two main types of studies have been undertaken. The first is these winter aerial surveys, which are not small surveys. They're done typically in February. There's certain conditions that they have to be conducted under. So they were done in 2018, 2019, and 2021. And they typically involve like a crew of people, um, and including, I think, typically three biologists who are basically looking out the window, making observations. And so, this work it involves coming up with a flight plan. So if you can imagine the path of the road, the planned road, and then what you're doing is you're running these things called transects, and they're lines that are at 90 degrees to the road. And depending on the study that's undertaken, these lines are very long, so they're perpendicular or at 90 degrees to the road. And just to give you an example, in 2018, there were 59 of these transects, so these perpendicular lines. And the idea is the transects is doing these transects and flying these transects. You're taking sort of a snapshot in time in February, in winter, when you can see the tracks because there's so much snow on the ground. And that gives you an opportunity to sort of say, okay, what's going on right now when it comes to caribou. Where are they? What are what are they doing? And so not only caribou are observed, but anything else. So there's other like any other animals that happen to be observed, whether
Wolverine,
it's a wolverine, that's right, moose, all those kinds of
wolves.
observations are made.
Yeah,
Yes, yeah, wolves. Yeah, we've seen lots of wolves, and then they record the location of them too. So these are really useful, even though they're snapshots. I mean, they're done typically over a week. I think these ones were done typically in a week. Um, Even though they're snapshots, they're pretty useful pieces of information, especially when you do like we've done 3 years of them. So just to give you an example, in 2018, the team surveyed 2,666 linear kilometers. So
wow.
that covered a study area of 5,800 square kilometers. That's a big area. So, and then 2019, we did 39 transects, each of 47 kilometers. And we flew a total of 1,776 kilometers. So this is a big area that was being covered by these surveys, and there were a lot of really interesting observations made as well. We also did the collaring studies, which are really really interesting on their own, and these allow you. It just takes you a step further. So it allows you to sort of follow the caribou for a 3-year period, and
In real time, right?
because in real time. That's right. So because you've got this collar on them, GPS collar, you know where they are. And so you can see what they're doing at different times a year. And it's just really, really helpful way of of tracking the animals and understanding the areas that they use. And the data that comes from it is very helpful for planning purposes.
Right. And
So let's
learning their
move now.
habitats or their habits rather.
Yes, absolutely, that's right. And because you can speculate on what those, where their calving areas might be, but you really don't know until you see the data, right? And see where they are in the
That's right.
areas that they're using.
That's right.
Um,
There's places we
well,
think we know.
yeah, that's right. Like in theory, you could say that, the calving areas might be these, isolated peninsulas that are protected, a little bit more protected from predators, right? You can think that, but you may not, that the data may not show that. So it's really helpful to have this collaring data. Um, so those are the two types of studies that have been undertaken. Again, a lot of time, a lot of resources have been spent on caribou, trying to understand more about them. But why don't we dig into the area surveys next and talk a little bit about the
Okay.
aerial surveys? Starting in 2018. And 2018, that was our first year of doing this. They saw 45 caribou at
I
seven
have a
different
question.
locations. Sure.
Oh, it says winter aerial surveys, but were there any collars put on in 2018 or no?
No, no, no,
Okay.
no. No, that's a separate exercise, right? So I can't remember the year the collars were put on. I think
The
that
year of the
was
collars.
the year of the collars. I think that was
2022
2019.
was it? 2019.
Well,
Okay.
they've been on for 3 years. Anyway, yeah, they were put on after a couple of winter surveys had been done.
Okay.
So in 2018, um, there were 45 seen, but the group size, the biggest group of caribou was 13 individuals. Um, they were only seen east and southeast of Webequie, and and not west of Webequie. And so the question might be, well, why is that? Well, east and southeast, you have what you call mature upland black spruce forests with lakes, and that's really good habitat for caribou. Um,
There's a lot of cover.
West of Webequie, yeah, lots of cover. But west of Webequie, They had a forest fire 40 years ago, so that area is still regenerating. So it's not ideal caribou habitat yet. It will be once it becomes more mature, but right now it isn't. So it's not really supporting caribou on the west side right now. So that's the 2018 results. Now, when we move to
Interesting.
2019, yeah, in 2019 it was a bit of a lean year for caribou when we did the survey. We saw 13 caribou in total, and these were at 4 locations, and the maximum size was of group size was 6. So it was different, right? It was different. They weren't in the study area. And again, when the ones that were observed were east and southeast of Webequie. Again with that mature habitat that they prefer. And again,
Right.
there were none seen west of Webequie, right? And so most of the caribou activity, as it says on the slide, um, was along a band extending approximately 5 to 30 kilometers east from Webequie. So that was what was seen. Now we'll move to the winter surveys of 2021, which is the slide on the screen right now. Um, this was an interesting year. There was a marked increase in caribou presence compared to 2018 and 2019. There were 552 animals recorded
Wow.
within yeah, it was a lot within the study area, the caribou study area, and they were distributed very widely. Um, like it was like a huge difference from previous years, unbelievable difference from previous years, and I don't know if we totally understand yet why, but that was what happened. So that 2021 survey was pretty eye-opening.
Yeah, and
But now
considering
look,
they have a very large area, to look
yeah,
at what was going on in the land and in the areas where they migrate.
but it's amazing. Like when you look at some of the maps that indicate the movements of these animals,
Hmm.
particularly because there's two populations, right? And I guess I should
Right.
have talked a bit about
Yeah.
this before. There's two populations in the area. There's the boreal, and then there's the eastern migratory. And the boreal population is across northern Ontario, all the way from Quebec to the Manitoba border. The eastern migratory population, they actually use the tundra, so and the forest tundra areas, so further north of where Webequie is, right? Where there's
Hmm.
less vegetation.
Oh, I think we froze.
I think we lost Don there. Can
Times a year.
you?
Yeah. Oh, there he goes. Oh,
His internet's going out. Can you take over from where he was, Jen?
I think so. So we were talking about um, the different herds, and we left off at the eastern migratory caribou herd. So they are utilizing the more northern regions or the tundra areas of the land. So we wanted to track the caribou movement across for all the seasons for 3 years, so we could look at the habitat areas, know where the calving areas are, and how they utilize the different areas and their movement in accordance with the corridor for Webequie Supply Road. So moving into how we were collaring the caribou. So far, 29 healthy adult female caribou were captured and collars were put on the caribou. So that was done by using a net gun from a helicopter. And so the collars were deployed, or they fell off in mid to late February. So that would have been last month. So we, to avoid disturbance deployed. The nets were put down, and the collars were put on in mid to late February, so that nobody was collaring pregnant cows. So later on in the season. So then each caribou had samples taken. So there had a sample of blood taken to look at that and look at health, their pellets, as well as fur samples to look at the pregnancy status and see if there were any kind of parasites, or look at the genetic analysis for the caribou herds, as well as looking at cortisol levels or stress levels in the caribou. And then they also looked at the teeth for the estimated age of the caribou. And I hear that Dawn is back.
I am back. Yes, sorry about that. It's my, I guess my
No
internet connection.
problem.
I'm
So
switching
we were
from,
looking at from one to the other.
yeah, telecom providers in the next few days, and obviously for good reason.
Oh,
So,
yes.
yeah, caribou
So
caribou
we're
collaring caribou
go
collaring
ahead.
is interesting. Just like you were saying, Jen. So we're targeting females with the caribou collaring, and the idea is with the females, because the females are, we want to understand where they go, when they have their calves, right? And where they nurse those calves, right? That's really important to understand that. And it's still not completely understood, the behavior, but it's it's a pretty good exercise. And being able to track animals in real time is really interesting, and it
Yeah.
yields a lot of information. So, and
I like
that's sort
that.
of,
I like that you pointed out that their behavior is not very well understood, considering we had less than, we had 25, we saw 25 one year,
yep.
just over 50 another year, and then all of a sudden, was it last year? There was about 551 caribou spotted, so that's a huge leap.
Yeah, I mean,
And
these
we
are,
don't know why.
yeah, we don't know why, right? Like, there are certain patterns, I think, that the wildlife biologists have picked up, but it's not absolute, right? I mean, weather plays a factor in so much of this, so much, but
Land use in
um
other areas.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And but I guess one thing I should point out is the reason why they target 30 is because they expect a certain amount of mortality, right, of death to
Mhm.
occur within a population like that. And as long as they've got, like, if they've got 20 to work with, then those data are what you call statistically significant, which allows them, so they can draw conclusions, from data sets of 20. So that's sort of why they target so many. It's not easy to do the capturing. It's not perfect. Obviously, capturing isn't perfect.
Mhm.
It's not. It is stressful for the animals. But again, it comes down to a decision where if you want to understand the animals and what they do, um, and cause less harm to their populations ultimately, then you do these kinds of studies where you can track them, right? You can follow them and see what they're doing. So, um,
That's it. I'm looking forward to the next part, the findings. I know we don't have those at the moment, but there were blood samples taken, hair samples,
yeah,
looking at the teeth for age. So it'd be interesting to look at all of those things as well. I can't wait to find that out.
yeah, no, you're right, Jen. Like, I don't think that's come out yet. Like, some of the stuff that I've seen, the preliminary data
Mhm.
that, like,
The
we're
health.
looking at doesn't include any of that. Yeah, health and things like that, and just, like, stress levels, right? Those cortisol levels are they're indicators of long-term stress. And so you maybe you can get a sense for how stressed these animals are, or from look, just because certain types of certain seasons, maybe the weather makes it harder to find food for them, so their stress levels might go up, and then other seasons might be easier, right? So it'd be interesting to sort of look at
Hmm.
that. Why don't we talk a little bit about the results of caribou collaring? Because that's kind of interesting.
Sure.
Um, there. The next slide I'm going to put up. It sort of takes all that data, location data, and puts it together, and which is pretty amazing. So you think of all the observations that are made over that period of time. So what what we're looking at on the screen now is activity areas for collared female caribou during the calving seasons of 2021 and 2022. And what you see here is the eastern migratory population, which are in blue. They head to the coast for calving, right?
Okay.
Meanwhile, the boreal caribou, and we only had one boreal. Well, there were two in the population that was actually captured and collared, but that one boreal caribou, I guess that survived. Um, it doesn't go to the coast, right? So you can see the difference in behavior, um, and it's just you. It's
Does it
very clear. Sorry, Jen.
When
Go
we're
ahead.
looking at the second image, Don, you see the green for the boreal
Yep.
caribou, then you see the blue for the eastern migratory. And do their paths, for lack of a better word, overlap in
Oh
part of this
yeah,
area? Because you see
absolutely.
the green one's like a crescent shaped or an arc, and then the blue one's a little bit
They do,
random,
and
I would say.
they interact. They mate. Jen, like
Okay.
the eastern migratory caribou come down right during the rest of the year. They come down into the forest and mate with the boreal caribou, but then
Okay.
they go back out to the coast, right? Between May and mid July during the calving season. So the
Okay.
females go to have their calves on the coast or in the coastal areas, and then the males stay in the forest when that happens. It's pretty interesting, like what's going on. And again, we're going to get more data on this. We're going to get a lot more
Mhm.
figures. This is just some of the preliminary stuff, but this next slide, which is the overwintering, and that's kind of interesting too, because when they winter, so when you're talking December to March, right? When they're wintering, not when they're calving, um, they can move around all over the place, but the one place they're not is on the coast during the winter. So they
Cold.
probably are able to get more food, right? Yeah, it's too cold, right?
Right. Cold and
So
windy
they're
over
probably
there.
able, yeah, cold and windy. You're better off going into the forest, right? Protected from the wind, probably more food available. So, you can see from these three figures um, what's happened, right? See how far away from the
Mhm.
coast both the eastern migratory and the boreal caribou populations are. So there's a real market difference between winter and the rest, and spring and summer and fall for that matter.
Mhm.
And so they're not, as you can tell from these three figures, they're not always in the same area in during the winter, right? They're not. You can tell from these figures. So that's kind of is consistent with the winter aerial surveys, right, Jen? Like where remember we had
Yes.
such small numbers, relatively small numbers, the first couple of years of the survey, and then 2021 we had like 552 in
The
this in the
boom.
local study area. Yeah, it was crazy. So the conditions must have been right for some reason. Something led them to that area just because there's more food available or whatever. But yeah, this just sort of hopefully this just gives everybody a little bit of a preview as to what to expect in the environmental assessment. There's going to be more data coming out, and it's very interesting. I think we'll try and share more with you, as we as it becomes available. But that's what we found, and moving on to the next slide. There's when you get data like this, you can also do what you call predictive modeling, where you can identify areas where you think they should be more likely to be found. So that kind of modeling occurs once you start getting the data on, the observational data on where the caribou were at different points in time. So
Oh,
this is
I
sort of
have.
the big. Sure, go ahead.
I'm interrupting you.
No,
So
no, go
there's
ahead.
just one more thing that we didn't talk about. I don't believe we did. Is that the collars are programmed to fall off? And I mistakenly said
That's
that
right.
was deployment that happened last month, and so they're supposed to fall off. Do we know when?
I don't know when. Yeah, yeah, that's right. They're well. I thought they were coming off in March, right? For
Like
the
this
NRL
month?
collars. Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
they're coming off. So yeah, they're set for 3 years, and then there's like a very small, harmless explosive that sort of goes off, and then the collar just falls off. And the idea is that you know um, it prevents, it saves us having to stress the animals again by capturing
Hmm.
them, by recapturing them. So that way we just go and look for the collar. And so the collar is still emitting a signal, right, as to where it is. So we'll send out a
Okay.
team and go and look for that collar and find the collar once the snow's gone. Um, so that's typically how that works. So I know for the Northern Roadlink project, they're a little bit further behind, but I think the collars are coming off those animals. And again, that work's being done further south, but all
Hmm.
the data's in on the ones that were done for Webquay Supply Road project. So, but there's lots more work to be done. That report's being prepared now, so there's more data crunching that's going on. But we certainly have a lot of information on caribou, which is important, right? We want to protect them, and we want to make sure that we put this road and build this road in a way that minimizes any impacts on them. So that's why we do the
Hmm.
baseline work, right? Is to find out what's going on and take that and get a good
Where
picture
they
of
go.
yeah, where they go and how everything behaves and the condition of everything, whether it's water or populations and fish populations, whatever. You need to have that baseline, that understanding, in order to have something to compare to. So that's in a nutshell. That's those are the preliminary caribou results, Jen, and that wraps up today's discussion. We hope this was helpful. We hope it encourages you to come back and see us again next week, back at the same time. And then next week we're going to
Ask us
talk about the.
questions.
Yeah, ask us. Feel free to ask us
Send
questions.
your comments.
Uh, yes, and next week we're going to talk about the floating road, which means basically how we build the road through the muskeg. So it's a great topic. So don't forget to keep in touch with our project team members via the contact information available on our website, supplyroad.ca. There's lots of information there. And we've been compiling information for the last 4 or 5 years. So please don't hesitate to go to our website. And if you have questions, absolutely get in contact with our team, and we'll be happy to respond and have a discussion with you. So, with that, Miigwech, and we will talk to you again next week, right, Jen?
Chimigwech. That's right.